I'd say that most people just assume that their decisions are logical and that their beliefs are based solely on reality without any bias, when that really isn't the case. And I don't blame them because it's natural. Our brains have evolved over millions of years primarily for survival against threats like famines, predators, or these life or death decisions that had to be made in split seconds. Whereas now, we don't have those same threats. In the modern world, we have the internet, politics, religion, finances, relationships. So that same thinking that we developed in the past tends to make us way less analytical and way easier to manipulate. And this happens because our cognitive biases are being exploited. So there are many different kinds of cognitive biases, but these are likely the reason why you hesitate to take even the smallest risk you know you should, why you follow a lot of online influencers who have actually figured out how to exploit these biases in you, and why your worldview might be a lot more curated and narrow than you realize. And so I want you to have the same experience I did, where my confidence, my decision making, my worldview, and my social interactions, and even my finances improved so much once I started recognizing and thinking against these biases that I had in myself, but also learning how they affect the people that you interact with on a daily basis will help you better understand their point of view, and also how you can use it to your advantage to be more convincing and get what you want out of conversations. So I'm going to make sure you understand some of the most common biases that most people tend to have, but I also want to make sure that this isn't just a generic psychology video that you can find on YouTube. So I'm going to go through some personal examples, of cognitive biases that I had as a, young man who has been able to build myself up in a few different areas of life, but who has also been held back really hard by the cognitive biases that I've developed. So overall, I would say that cognitive biases have really increased my fear of rejection, which was one of the biggest things that held me back from the things I wanted, especially socially, where I do consider myself pretty social, but I have to spend way more effort convincing myself to do something than I would like to do. Before taking steps like putting myself in different social situations, participating, in public places, even if I'm not 100% certain of the answer, asking dumb questions to people that might be more qualified than me. I knew all these things were good for me. They were good for my learning. They were good for my adaptability because they're pushing me out of my comfort zone. But I was just so scared of any downside that could happen because of the decision that I made, that I would just make no decision and it would just cloud my judgment because, my cognitive biases are trying to protect me for survival when I'm not in that survival state really anymore. Even if I look back at some of the risks that I took in the past that didn't really pan out, they mostly came from fear of missing out rather than actually thinking analytically about whether I should take this risk or not. And that too is for the same reason that I had a heightened fear of rejection. And so I'm still in the process of overcoming them in myself, because there's a lot of decisions that I know I should take and I should lean more into, but I tend to stop myself because of my biases. But I think educating yourself on them and identifying them is the first step in having the life that you actually want for yourself, instead of what society tells you, what the internet is feeding you, what your family is telling you need to do, and whoever else is, feeding these biases that you have. And so you might not think in this video that when I'm discussing things about religion, finances, politics, you might not think that that is applicable to you. And so I kind of implore you to think that maybe this is confirmation bias on your part. And this is the first bias that I think I want to talk about. Confirmation bias is essentially when you have an opinion, but you only take information that would support it, and you avoid or don't consider things that would oppose it. And so if somehow this offends you, I would just ask that you skip this video and pretend like I'm not talking about your beliefs. So like if you consider yourself, right wing, and you only view right wing media and you just completely ignore the things on the left side, or you don't even consider it or listen to it in the first place, then you could be having confirmation bias. And so I would say the reason why people have this is that a lot of the time their beliefs are tied to their identity. I think religion, politics. These are two of the biggest places where your belief is, a big part of who you are. And so any opposition against these things, even if it's constructive and meant to help you, can be viewed as a bit of an insult, right? Could be viewed as an insult to, the person themselves and their intelligence, but also their social circle or like their tribe around them. Another thing is that people don't like being uncomfortable or being in uncomfortable situations, and being told that you are wrong is an extremely uncomfortable situation. Whereas being told you are right does the opposite. It gives you pride, and even on a hormonal level, your dopamine itself and like the other hormones in your body that make you feel good will increase. And so that's why a lot of people tend to just stick into groups where they already have this confirmed established belief, and they don't like to hear things from outsiders, even if that is well intended. With algorithms and the internet, I think this just becomes even more apparent, because once you start consuming a certain type of content, your algorithm just tightens around that, and it just keeps showing you more of the same thing that you already want, or like things that are very adjacent to it, as opposed to just giving you, a blanket of, whatever's on your timeline in chronological order, right? They switch that for this reason specifically, because they know what people want to watch. And so if you only see what comes up on your feed, you start to think that your worldview is reality, because it looks like everybody around you who follows you or who you follow agree with what you're saying. But in reality, you're just seeing a lot of curated information of what you already believe in, and you're not getting really the other side of the story. I saw this in myself. I think most recently, I was on the internet, and I was like trying to research things like travel and stuff like that on Instagram. And there's a lot of places in the world, I'd say certain places specifically, that get a really bad rep online. And I just tended to agree with that because that's all I saw in my feed. But I think what caused my beliefs to actually shift is when I got out of my house. I consumed different sources, and I even went to those places myself to see that like the internet really does just crave negativity, and it wants to feed my confirmation bias so that I keep watching, keep reacting to the things that they're already showing me. And so I think the advice here is pretty simple. I say this over and over again in so many videos. You need to get out of your bubble, and you cannot stay home most of the day. Not only is this bad for your mental health to stay home all day, but the beliefs that you already have, they can both be reinforced or challenged logically if you go outside and you try and have interactions in an unbiased way with like real people, instead of a lot of echo chamber communities. And so you could be very well right about your idea, but if you haven't tried to experience the opposite, I don't think you have done your due diligence, because there's so many opportunities, especially when you're like outside, that just come by when you have connections with all different types of people and you're kind of in the right place, right time. It's just you're putting yourself more into those situations where you're going to be in the right place, right time if you have more connections with a diverse group. I'm not saying you have to be friends with everybody. Some people it's just not worth it. Sometimes you need to just lock in on your own stuff, but you should be well connected with various types of people. The nice thing is those people have helped me at work. They've helped me with my side businesses. They've helped me literally at the gym just to give me a spot or like somebody to compete with. So I really think that you need to be able to find a way to get out of echo chambers. Sometimes they're really good, right? If you are specifically trying to develop a certain skill. And I would say be smart with challenging what thoughts you have, because you don't need to challenge every single belief. That's not what I'm trying to say. A lot of people, like I'd see, that realize that they have confirmation bias. They start thinking about confirmation bias in every part of their life, and that just gives them so much anxiety. When what I'm just trying to say is go seek out novel ideas, go seek out some novelty in your life, and explore the topics that you have kind of a struggling belief with, right? I think a lot of people, whatever culture they are brought up in, whatever religion they are brought up in, they just adopt that because it's the easiest thing to do. When I think you should kind of ask that to yourself, like, is this something I actually believe in? Is this something I actually get joy in? It could be something you realize I don't believe in, but you still participate in. Like I would say, a lot of cultural things, I don't necessarily believe in them, but I'm fine to participate in it because it doesn't take anything away from me, and it kind of helps the people around. I'd say because I spend a lot of time in the self improvement space, I see a lot of people that have a really open mindset towards going to the gym and things like that. But then when it comes to people that didn't have the best dating experience, they just tend to turn to a defeatist mindset against women, because I see that's pretty popular, or getting more popular online, where they just blame how society is treating men against women, or their own genetics, and they think that these are the reasons why they're not going to be able to go anywhere in life in the dating realm, when in reality they've just put minimal effort in trying to improve that area of their life and going through the hardship in that area of life. Because it does take some courage to be able to go from no dating experience to slowly increasing that. But instead, they'd rather spend that time doing the thing that's a bit more comfortable, which is like just watching videos on why the dating market is messed up, or like a lot of black pill stuff, because that's just confirming the thoughts that they already have. It gives them a lot of comfort knowing that they're not wrong, it's the world around them. And like, I'm somebody who agrees that genetics matter a lot, right? Not just for looks, not just for dating, for IQ as well, for your finances as well. Like, I have videos on this, but it's not a yes or no answer really. And there are things that you can do to win, but they're not necessarily the most comfortable, and they might go against the what your confirmation bias wants you to do. And so I would also say to just try and play to win, as opposed to playing to be comfortable and have your biases confirmed, right? Even on a creator or marketing side, you can use this to your advantage, right? One thing that a lot of creators or marketing people can do is niche down. I'd say it's the reason why a lot of YouTubers can just repeat basically the same video multiple times and people will still watch it, because those people just want their beliefs confirmed. I would say that this YouTube channel is kind of a blueprint on what not to do if you want to maximize a sticky audience, because I could have niched down a lot harder into just health videos, or just have an audience who believes in the importance of micronutrients but also supplements, or I could have talked only about finances, and that would actually be easier for me because I'm just repeating the same topics in just different formats, right? It could be reactions, it could be reading studies, it could be something informative, but it's basically the pretty similar topics over and over again, or like the same video over and over again, and that helps you with a really sticky audience, and it's a lot easier for you to do. But I would say for this channel personally, I just want this to be about my own interests and like things that I can do to help you. But I do use this idea of confirmation bias in my own career. So, for example, I work as a computer engineer, and I've been trying to leverage a lot more AI, and oftentimes that requires help from other people, or like co-signing from other people, and like permission from the higher ups to allot me more time, or funding. Instead of me going to people that are impartial about this and trying to convert them, I just put these ideas that I have and these tools that I made into chats and groups, and I talk to coworkers who already want to adopt AI. So I'm kind of feeding into their confirmation that AI is going to change things, instead of trying to convert people who think quite the opposite, right? So it's the people that are coming to me are already AI focused believers, so they're going to have a better view of what I'm saying compared to if I just made this general. And then those people already have a good view, so they're going to like it a little bit more, and then they can do a better job in convincing the people around them. That's just one way that I'm trying to do this, and obviously it's not everything is tailored toward confirmation bias. Obviously, that'd be kind of dumb, but it's just like trying to tell you that you don't need to convince everybody when you have a group of people that can easily be convinced and want to have their beliefs confirmed. So I used to think that only dumb people have confirmation bias, but I would say the subset of people with the hardest confirmation bias to help overcome are actually smart people, because a lot of smart people, they don't want to admit that they are wrong, because their identity in being smart means that they don't get stuff wrong. I've met some really great thinkers, a lot of great engineers that I've worked with, that kind of have some outlandish or straight up wrong, I would say, thoughts on politics, religion, and even tech and AI, which should be their domain. But I would say it's because of their intelligence that they know how to back up their thoughts, and they know how to debate back, even if it's wrong or outdated, better than somebody who considers himself dumb and so therefore they can be easily convinced. This is related but kind of opposite almost to something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I will get into later. I would also say that smart people are also good at convincing other people of their opinions because of another bias called the authority bias, which is basically when you change your opinion or you take something as fact just because of who said it rather than what was actually said to you. So, like, the same idea could come from two different people, and I'm guilty of this. Like I said, I'm guilty of all of these, where you accept it from one person and you reject it from the other purely based off of how much you respect them. I think this especially hits young men who didn't have a solid male role model growing up. Like, I noticed this in myself. My father is a huge part of my life, but he mostly influenced me through his actions, not really through what he said, and not really explicitly guiding me. Like, I mostly had to observe him in his real life because we didn't talk too much growing up, especially. And so what happened is it made me a lot more susceptible to taking the advice of a YouTuber, for example, that kind of filled that role for me, who would kind of sit down. It felt like they were sitting down with you, they were talking to you one on one and trying to guide you on things that maybe your own dad didn't teach you. YouTube was a huge positive for me. It really transformed my self improvement mindset and my habits in real life. And just, I'm so grateful for all the education that I got from it. You know, I would watch YouTube for everything, how to be better at basketball, video games, the gym. It was basically my guide for life when I felt like I wasn't given that. But that's the thing. It also made me a lot more easily influenced by any authority figures that didn't look like my teachers in school. Because maybe against them I was a bit more vocal to combat their opinion, but when it was like a male role model who it felt like they were put here to teach you something, that made me a lot more susceptible to authority bias. I would say one way that really burned me was following financial advice from popular YouTubers. I saw popular YouTubers and like the subscriber count as something that made them authority in the space. And in the past, with basketball or with video games or with the gym, watching YouTube had done well for me. Watching the bigger YouTube channels had done well for me. And so I figured people who give good general financial advice on YouTube, if they did that and they had a big follower count, they were vetted to also give good stock picks. Um, you know, because to me they sounded smart based off of what they said, which played a little bit into my confirmation bias because I already agreed with those things, but they also had the subscriber count to back it up, and so it worked in the beginning. Um, the stock picks that they recommended, I'd be one of the first people to watch the video. So as it pumped up, I would also be part of that, and that played into my confirmation bias, right? Because I thought that I knew what I was doing, and that the stock, the pick is going up, and I sold it at the right time. So it did pretty well for me at the beginning, but just as fast as it did well, it came crashing down, and I lost like tens of thousands of money, of my own money that I put into this. And I was pretty devastated in the moment, but I'm super glad to have learned that lesson at 18 and 19 rather than much later in my life, because I would say that authority bias is something big for young people for the reason I already talked about, but people are still very susceptible to this. But I would say, yeah, that I'm really glad actually that I lost tens of thousands of dollars in that time of my life, because I was able to recoup more than like tenfold back, and at the same time, it was just a lesson that I can take throughout the rest of my life. And like, for each of these biases, I want to talk about the flip side, right? Where you can use this to your advantage. And I would say that people naturally trust perceived authority, and so that should be your goal, to become an authority figure in a specific area. And then when you move to any other area, you also get this credibility backed with you. Like I mentioned in my career, um, with the whole AI space and stuff like that, I'm trying to really hyper focus on this and really do this to the best of my ability. I'm going out of my way during my free time to implement this. I have a job outside of all this AI stuff, that I keep up, but I'm trying to take courses, have discussions with other AI leaders at my work, and really trying to do this part well instead of trying to be a jack of all trades. Because then, if I do this well, I gain some sort of authority, and if people come to me and they want to have their questions answered, I can do a better job of it, right? I'm not saying to fake any of this, but then when I want to move to something else, people realize that I can, if I can do that well, then I can probably do this well Now, you could get swindled by somebody with false authority, but there's something that can make it worse, and that is sunk cost fallacy, which is basically when you keep putting in time, money, or energy into something just because you already have it invested in the first place, rather than looking at the situation fresh and asking yourself if this still makes sense forward. And the reason why this occurs is also tied to another cognitive bias called loss aversion, which is basically where losing something hurts you twice as much psychologically as gaining the same thing feels good. Okay, hopefully that made sense. So essentially, if you lose $1,000, it feels twice as bad as winning $1,000 feels good, even though they are objectively the same amount. And so for a lot of ambitious people, a lot of people that are hard-headed and don't really want to quit, if you take your losses on something that you actually should take your losses on, it feels like you accepted defeat. Whereas if you keep your money invested or you keep trying to work on this thing that is basically, not going to go anywhere, there's still that possibility of return or benefit, but in reality, it could just be stunting your own progress to keep chipping away at something. We're told not to quit early, and I think that's often true. But sometimes, always, you need to look at the situation analytically and fresh, whether this is something that you should continue putting your time in. Obviously, with my investing example, I invested the money, and when the company would go up a couple percent, even if it was down all time, that kept my hopes up, right? In reality, I should have sold because these companies were not making a lot of money, and eventually, actually, in like a few years, they ended up going bankrupt, a lot of them. But it's the fact that I had this hope alive that made me feel like maybe I wasn't going to lose my money in this, and that like maybe the YouTuber who gave me the stock pick actually was right, and I just had to wait, right? And that's what they would tell you, right? Like diamond hands was like the main thing that they would tell you. But now with the new strategy that I have with investing in the stock market, which is just simple index investing, where you invest in a broad, ETF, and you don't have to worry about picking individual stocks. And what you realize with that is that like the time that you put in the market is way more important than the timing of when you put it of when you take things out. In fact, I don't even sell any of my ETFs, and so that's because that is a way that my biases don't get exploited. Right, the only strategy I have is that every week I try and put a certain amount of money, and I try and invest it in a total world index fund, and that way, I don't need to predict anything. I don't need to worry about my biases getting in the way because the strategy is fixed, right? Just keep putting your money in here at a certain point of time because we know that in the long run, for the most part, and based off past historical data, obviously we don't know the future. That this could be completely wrong, though probably not. The market is just going to go up, right? As long as you believe that technology is going to keep advancing and that like the countries, the world in general is just going to keep getting better, they're going to go up. You don't need to worry about picking the right stock, reading the finances of a stock or anything like that. And so that's why, for me personally, this strategy is great because then I can just take that time and energy and put it into all the other things that I have, right? Working, learning relevant skills to my work, doing things that are just fun for me, right? Like traveling, playing sports, going to the gym, focusing on my health, making these videos, exercising, right? I can just put my time in there and also, save a lot of my own mental stress because these cognitive biases aren't going to be exploited because I'm not trading or anything like that, right? It's just one strategy that you have to follow that has been shown to work. So loss aversion in a bad situation can make you stay in that situation for longer, but loss aversion also has its good sides to it, I would say, right? Because you are scared of losing things, you're less likely to put your money into stupid things like gambling, right? Gambling that money away. And despite the stories that I told you before, I am pretty good at saving. I'm quite good at saving and avoiding spending my money in stupid ways, partly because of the loss aversion that I have. I feel like I've made quite a bit of sacrifices in my life, where I've had to work, times that I didn't feel like working, that I still pushed through it to be able to get where I am financially. And so I don't want to lose that progress on a dumb decision. And so, yeah, I have loss aversion, but I try and think about it in a more analytical way where I avoid most opportunities and I avoid most investments that I get. And instead, I try to focus on one thing specifically, but at the same time, if I can put money to make myself better in that one skill that I'm talking about, then I should do that, right? If it can increase my earning capacity. So for me, putting in money towards education like university, that panned out super well. Whereas putting that money into something that I'm not hyper focused in, like sports gambling, that just doesn't make sense. And my loss aversion actually helps me there. Posting on YouTube and social media, loss aversion did hit me because to me it did feel like quite a bit of a risk. And in fact, the gain doesn't feel as obvious, especially with the type of channel that I have, which doesn't really have a niche, right? I had this fear that speaking my mind, people in real life would see that, they would find out, and they wouldn't approve. And so for the longest time, when I wanted to make videos, I just coped by saying that, I'm not going to post videos because I'm too busy. When in reality, I'm more busy now than ever, really. And I kind of had this realization that I had to stop myself from thinking based off of what other people wanted for me or what other people might want from me, because I didn't even start, right? So I didn't even know. And I think this directly goes into the spotlight effect, which I will leave for part two. But essentially, most people just don't care that I am posting on Instagram or TikTok or, wherever people are likely to make snap judgments. Okay, so I realized while editing this that I lost the last 2 minutes because my storage went full, but that's fine. I'll just re-record this, and I'm not too sure I don't think anybody's even watching up to this point, so I'm going to use this as a way to just film in one take, kind of like practice for myself. But essentially, what I was trying to get at is that me posting on YouTube or Instagram, whatever, is kind of a way for me to train myself to do things even if I don't necessarily feel ready. And like to not just think about loss aversion, but instead of what I could gain. Because, in the future, it could be the opportunity that presents itself could be a promotion at work, it could be a business idea, and I don't want to have to always default to do what is less risky because of what I built myself up to now. And so this is just a way for me to train myself to do that. For you, you might have other decisions where loss aversion is coming into play. It could be that you're in the middle of university, and I see a bunch of guys who are taking these programs that they don't even like, they don't even care about, they don't even plan to do in the future, and they're not even necessarily good at, but they just do it because that's what society and the parents value. Or this could be like a lot of people, I see them in relationships that they're not necessarily happy, but they're more so scared that they're not going to be able to find somebody else like this person. And so, you have to be able to think more clearly, and this is just one way that I'm training myself to do that. I'll get into some more biases in the other video, but I think these alone, confirmation bias, authority bias, sunk cost fallacy, and loss aversion, if you start recognizing these in yourself and the people around you, your decision making is already going to be so much better. And for part two, I will get into the Dunning-Kruger effect, anchoring bias, negativity bias, and the spotlight effect to also better enhance our decision making.